I sat at the very back of the ballroom, my chair tucked against the wall, as though I had been placed there deliberately to be hidden from sight. The chandeliers above spilled golden light across polished wood floors, the kind of light that made everything look grand, everything but me. I kept my hands folded in my lap, the fabric of my dress wrinkled, a second-hand gown altered to fit, while at the front of the room, my family prepared to make their grand announcement. My name is Clara Dawson. I am 22 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the shadow in a house that worshipped only one star. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of my sister Sophia, the daughter my parents loved, the daughter they paraded, the daughter who was always more. The music softened, the guests quieted, and my father, Victor Dawson, stepped forward with his voice already raised, as if the whole world belonged to him. He smiled cufflinks, gleaming, his hand resting proudly on Sophia's shoulder, as though she were a crown he had forged with his own hands. My mother, Marjorie, stood beside them, her smile stretched wide, her eyes glimmering with pride, reserved only for the child she deemed worthy. Victor's words rang through the room. Tonight we celebrate the brilliance, the beauty, and the future of this family. Tonight, Sophia Dawson will inherit what she deserves, the very best of what the Dawsons have built. There was a pause, a dramatic sweep of his arm, and then he declared it as if he were king bestowing land upon his heir. $50 million in company shares. The beach house in Miami, our jewel on the shore. The room erupted in applause. Glasses raised, voices cheering as if Sophia had ascended a throne. I clapped too softly, my hands trembling. My stomach twisting so hard I thought I might break. I was invisible to them, but then Victor turned slightly, his eyes flicking to me with that cruel spark I knew too well. His lips curved into a smirk as he added for the room to hear. And then there is Clara, our other daughter. The dumb one. The one who never quite managed to shine. A ripple of laughter broke out among a few guests, not loud, but sharp enough to cut. Sophia looked back at me, her lips twitching in amusement, as if she too found it entertaining. My mother did not defend me, she never did. She simply adjusted her necklace and leaned closer to Victor, as if nothing had been said. I swallowed hard, the taste of humiliation burning in my throat, my cheeks hot, my eyes stinging. I wanted to vanish into the wall behind me, to disappear before they stripped me of whatever dignity I had left. This was not the first time I had been ridiculed in public, but never had it been done with so many witnesses, with chandeliers glittering above and champagne glasses chiming as though cruelty could be celebrated. I lowered my head, gripping the hem of my dress, willing myself not to cry. The guests returned their attention to Sophia, their congratulations flowing, their admiration endless, while I shrank further into silence. Rage and sorrow tangled inside me, a storm no one could see. For years I had endured this, for years I had been told I was nothing, and tonight it felt as though that truth had been carved into stone before the eyes of hundreds. Yet as I sat there drowning in shame, something shifted. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man moving through the crowd, not clapping, not smiling, his steps purposeful, his eyes locked on me. He was older, tall, with sharp features and an expression that carried weight. My breath caught as he approached, weaving through the sea of guests who paid him no mind. He stopped beside me, his presence cutting through the noise, and without ceremony, he placed a thick white envelope on the table in front of me. His voice was low, deliberate, carrying words that pierced straight through the fog of humiliation. It is time to tell them who you really are. My heart jolted my fingers, hovering above the envelope, trembling. I stared at it as though it might vanish if I blinked. I wanted to ask who he was, why he was here, what he meant, but when I looked up, he was already walking away, disappearing back into the crowd as swiftly as he had appeared. My pulse thundered, my palms slick with sweat. Who I really am. The words echoed louder than the applause for Sophia, louder than my father's booming pride. For the first time that night, for the first time in years, I felt the air around me shift. I had been mocked, dismissed, erased, but this envelope sitting heavy before me whispered of a different truth, one I had never dared to imagine. The applause still roared for Sophia, but my eyes were fixed on that envelope, and deep within my chest a spark flickered, faint, yet undeniable. When I think back to my earliest memories, they are not filled with warmth or laughter. They are laced with the sharp sting of comparison and the echo of my father's voice declaring that one child was worth more than the other. From the time I could walk, Sophia was the golden girl, the daughter who drew every beam of praise like sunlight bending toward her. And me, Clara Dawson, I was the other one, the shadow that lingered at the edge of every family portrait barely acknowledged, except as the punchline to their cruel jokes. I remember being 7 years old standing in the living room while Victor lifted Sophia onto his shoulders after she brought home a certificate for a spelling competition. Guests applauded, my mother beamed, and Victor announced with pride that Sophia was destined for greatness. I had been clutching a drawing I had made that morning, a picture of our family under a bright sky. I held it out, hoping for a glance, but my father barely looked at it. He chuckled and said, "At least Clara can draw. We will need an artist to decorate Sophia's offices someday." The room laughed politely, and I felt the paper crumple in my sweaty hands. That was my childhood, a series of moments where any accomplishment of mine was twisted into a reminder of my lesser worth. At the dinner table, the hierarchy was cemented. Victor at the head, Sophia at his right, Marjorie close by, glowing with pride at every word Sophia uttered, and me placed at the far end, the afterthought. By the time I opened my mouth, the conversation had already shifted back to Sophia's achievements. When I did speak, Victor rolled his eyes and my mother sighed as though I had interrupted something important. Silence became my shield. Better to stay quiet than endure their disdain. Yet even silence could not protect me. Victor had a temper that erupted with startling ease. Once when I was 10, I dropped a glass of milk. It shattered across the tiled floor. Before I could even pick up the pieces, his hand cracked across my cheek. The sound rang louder than the glass had. I remember pressing my palm against the sting, my heart pounding, and looking toward my mother for comfort. She did not move. She smoothed the tablecloth instead and murmured, "You should be more careful, Clara." That was the pattern. Victor's hand, Marjorie's indifference, Sophia's smirk. Sophia learned quickly that she could do no wrong. If I protested when she yanked my hair or shoved me down the hallway, Victor would bark at me to stop whining. Once, when I was 12, Sophia pushed me hard down the last 3 steps of the staircase. My knee split open, blood staining my sock. Sophia laughed, calling me clumsy, and when I told Victor what happened, he only said, "Maybe if you watched your step, you would not embarrass yourself." He never even looked at Sophia. I learned then that pain in this house was not to be acknowledged unless it belonged to the chosen daughter. My mother reinforced it in softer, quieter ways. She would hand me a stack of laundry and whisper, "Why cannot you be more like your sister Clara? Look at how she shines." Her tone was calm, almost casual, but those words sank into me like stones into water. Over the years, the weight grew heavier. Sophia thrived under their gaze. She knew she was untouchable, and she relished it. She would sit on the couch, legs crossed elegantly, while I ran errands, mowed the lawn, or scrubbed dishes. She would toss remarks at me like darts. "Careful, Clara, you missed a spot." "Try harder, you are embarrassing yourself." And Victor and Marjorie would laugh as though she were witty, as though cruelty was entertainment. At school, I sought refuge in books. I loved literature the way words could paint worlds where people like me mattered. My teachers encouraged me, one in particular telling me I had a gift for writing. I dreamed of entering a statewide essay competition when I was 14. I brought the forms home filled with excitement, only to have Victor snatch them from my hand. "Writing," he scoffed, "is for people who have nothing better to do. You are wasting time, Clara. Focus on something useful if you are capable of that." He tore the forms in two. My heart tore with them. I cried myself to sleep that night, my pillow damp, my chest aching with the certainty that I would never be allowed to matter. These memories stitched themselves into me, scars invisible to the eye, but no less real. I stopped reaching for their approval. I stopped showing them my drawings, my stories, my dreams. Instead, I carried them quietly, guarding them as fragile treasures no one could destroy because no one knew they existed. Still, there was no escape from Sophia's constant presence. She basked in their adoration, and she knew exactly how to twist the knife. At 16, when I took a part-time job at a diner to save money for myself, Sophia smirked as I walked out the door in my uniform. "Do not forget to wash the grease off your hands," she called after me. We would not want the neighbors thinking the Dawson family keeps a servant." Victor chuckled. Marjorie shook her head with a smile, and I walked into the night pretending I had not heard, though the words echoed in me like chains rattling. The house itself became a cage. Every corner held echoes of Sophia's laughter, Victor's booming lectures, Marjorie's sighs. I lived there, but I was not truly alive. I was a placeholder, a reminder of what they considered failure. The cruelty was not always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, insidious. The way my mother would set one less place at the table, forcing me to fetch a chair from the corner. The way Victor forgot my birthday but celebrated Sophia's with fireworks. The way Sophia monopolized every conversation until my silence became the only contribution I was allowed. My body carried the bruises of shoves and slaps, but my spirit bore the deeper wounds of being unseen. And yet, despite everything, a flicker remained inside me. A flicker that longed for someone to say I mattered, that my existence was more than a shadow of Sophia's brilliance. That flicker kept me breathing even when despair pressed heavy on my chest. I held onto the hope, fragile as it was, that someday there might be a place in this world where I was not the dumb one, not the forgotten one, but simply Clara. The truth was that my family did not just neglect me. They defined me, stamped me with labels, and expected me to live forever in that cage. They told me who I was, and I believed them for a long time. But deep down, a question remained stubborn and persistent. What if they were wrong? What if I was more than what they saw? When the weight of home grew unbearable, when the walls of the Dawson house pressed in like a prison, there was one place I could breathe. My grandfather Edward's porch sat on the edge of the countryside, a quiet refuge far from the marble floors and sharp voices of my parents' world. Edward Dawson, founder of the company that bore our name, was a man whose presence carried both strength and gentleness. He was not loud like Victor, nor calculating like Marjorie. He was steady, his eyes kind, even when his body grew frail with age. To me, he was the only person who ever saw Clara. Not the dumb one, not the shadow, just Clara. I remember the first time I ran to him after Sophia had shoved me down the stairs. My knee was bleeding, the skin torn and raw, my sobs breaking through the silence of the night. Edward did not scold me for crying. He did not tell me to toughen up. He simply lifted me into his arms, carried me inside, and sat me down while he cleaned the wound. His hands were steady despite the tremor of age, his voice calm as he told me that pain was nothing to be ashamed of. Every scar, he said, told a story, and the story of endurance was greater than the story of privilege. His words settled in me like a balm, soothing wounds deeper than the one on my knee. It became a pattern. When Victor's anger struck, when Marjorie's whispers cut, when Sophia's cruelty cornered me, I found my way to Edward's porch. We would sit in rocking chairs as the sun set his cane resting at his side, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He never asked me about grades, never measured my worth by the trophies I did not have. Instead, he asked about my dreams. What makes you happy, Clara? What do you see when you think of your future? I remember telling him once at 14 that I loved writing, that words made me feel alive in a way nothing else did. My parents had called it useless, but Edward leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. Writing, he said, is power. Do not ever believe it is wasted. Words can build empires and tear them down. They can heal wounds no one sees. His affirmation ignited something in me that my family had tried to bury. For the first time, I felt permission to believe in myself. Edward did more than listen. He taught me lessons that Sophia never learned, lessons my parents never valued. He taught me the importance of humility, of seeing people not for what they could give, but for who they were. He spoke of his early days when he built the Dawson Company from nothing. He told me of sleepless nights, of mistakes that nearly cost him everything, of how perseverance mattered more than brilliance. He never boasted, he simply shared as though handing me tools for a future he believed I deserved. There was one evening I will never forget. I was 16. Sophia had cornered me in the kitchen, furious that I had borrowed one of her books. She slapped it from my hands and called me pathetic. The sting of her words clung to me long after she had gone. I fled to Edward's house, tears streaking my face. He listened quietly, his expression unreadable, and when I finished, he leaned closer. "Never mistake their blindness for truth," he said. "You have something Sophia does not. You endure. And one day, when the moment comes, you will know why I chose to believe in you." His words puzzled me then, but they clung to me like an anchor. Chosen. Believe in you. I replayed them often in the dark of my room when loneliness pressed heavy and hope seemed distant. Edward's faith became my secret strength. I began to notice how he treated others: the gardeners, the drivers, the clerks at the market. He greeted each one by name, asked about their families, listened to their answers. To him, worth was not defined by wealth or achievement. It was defined by humanity. Watching him, I realized how different he was from Victor, who barked orders and never remembered names, and from Sophia, who looked at workers as though they were beneath her. Edward carried dignity not only for himself, but for everyone around him, and it made me wonder if perhaps dignity could be mine too. Our conversations became the lifeline I clung to. When the house felt suffocating, I held on to his stories. When Sophia's laughter cut into me, I recalled his assurance that endurance was strength. Slowly, I began to collect fragments of confidence, fragile but real. I kept a notebook hidden beneath my bed, filling it with words, sketches of scenes, snippets of dialogue. I never showed anyone, but I told Edward. He smiled, tapping his cane against the porch floor. "Keep writing, Clara. One day, your words will carry you farther than you imagine." Then came the year he grew ill. The vibrant man who had carried me as a child began to weaken. His cane became more than an accessory. His steps slower, his breaths heavier. He withdrew from the company from the public eye, and people whispered that Edward Dawson was fading. My heart ached at the thought of losing him, the only anchor I had ever known. Yet even in illness, he was steady. He called me to his side one evening, his voice softer than I had ever heard. "Clara," he said, "you must remember this. The future of this family cannot rest on arrogance or pride. It must rest on humility and endurance. You understand that better than anyone. When the time comes, you will know what to do." I nodded, though tears blurred my vision. I wanted to ask what he meant, but he pressed a kiss to my forehead and closed his eyes. That was the last clear conversation we had before he slipped from public life entirely. Victor and Marjorie spoke of him as though he were already gone, though I knew he still lingered in the quiet of his home unseen. They moved forward with Sophia at the center, and I was pushed further into the shadows. But Edward's words lived inside me, burning softly, waiting. In a world that told me I was nothing, he told me I was something. In a family that dismissed me, he reminded me I mattered. He became the thread that stitched me together when I was unraveling. And though I did not know it then, the promise he made, the faith he placed in me, would one day collide with the night that changed everything. The night of the inheritance ceremony was unlike anything I had ever seen. The ballroom in New York had been transformed into a palace of glass and gold. Chandeliers dripped with crystals, reflecting light in every direction, bathing the crowd in a glow that felt more like theater than reality. The air smelled of polished wood and champagne, the murmur of voices swelling as more guests arrived, dressed in gowns and tuxedos that gleamed under the lights. Valets lined the entrance, opening doors for luxury cars that purred up the circular drive. I stepped inside, wearing a dress that had once belonged to Sophia, altered poorly to fit me, the hem brushing my ankles in uneven folds. I kept my head low, conscious of how out of place I looked. People barely noticed me, their eyes drawn instead to the glittering figure descending the staircase. Sophia. My sister glowed in a gown of midnight blue, her hair swept back, diamonds at her throat, catching the light. She moved as if the entire evening belonged to her, and in truth it did. My parents hovered near her like attendants to royalty. Victor's broad shoulders filled his suit, his jaw sharp with satisfaction. Marjorie's smile was polished, perfected, her hand resting on Sophia's arm as though guiding a queen to her throne. I lingered near the wall, half hidden by tall arrangements of lilies, watching as guests swarmed to greet them. Compliments poured over Sophia, each one another brick in the pedestal she stood on. I heard the words repeated again and again. Brilliant, extraordinary, destined. No one used those words for me. I slipped into my seat near the back, the placement itself a message. Important guests filled the front rows. Business partners and politicians. Family friends occupied the middle. I was placed so far back it felt deliberate, as if they had wanted to keep me out of the photographs entirely. I pressed my hands together in my lap, trying to steady the tremor in my fingers. The ceremony began with Victor stepping onto the stage. The spotlight caught the silver in his hair, the gleam of his cufflinks. He held the microphone like a weapon, his voice booming across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight to honor my daughter, Sophia Dawson." Applause erupted. Glasses raised, a cheer rolling through the ballroom. Victor's chest swelled as he continued. For years, the Dawson family has built not only a company, but a legacy. Tonight, we celebrate the one who will carry that legacy forward, the daughter who embodies our pride, our future, and our name. He gestured to Sophia, who stood gracefully near the front, her chin lifted, her smile radiant. The crowd cheered louder, clapping until the sound echoed against the high ceilings. My throat tightened. I knew what was coming, and yet the words still sliced through me when they arrived. "I am proud to announce that Sophia will inherit the cornerstone of our family's future," Victor declared. $50 million in shares the beach house in Miami and the trust that secures her position as the face of our legacy. Sophia bowed her head modestly, though her eyes glittered with triumph. The applause thundered again, filling the room with celebration that felt like daggers to my chest. I clapped too, because not clapping would have been noticed, but each movement of my hands felt heavier, my stomach twisting tighter. I wanted to vanish into the floor. Then Victor's eyes flicked to me, a flash of cruelty gleaming in them. "And of course, there is Clara, our other daughter," he added with a smile, sharp as a knife, "the quiet one, the one who never quite managed to shine." A ripple of laughter rose from the crowd. It was not loud, but it was enough. Enough to remind me that my humiliation was entertainment. Sophia's smirk reached me across the room. Marjorie's eyes slid past me as though I were invisible. Heat rose in my face, my pulse hammering in my ears. I wanted to scream, to stand up, to tell them that I was not what they believed, but the weight of years of silence pressed me back into my seat. My hands clenched beneath the table, my nails biting into my palms. Guests turned their attention back to Sophia, offering congratulations, raising toasts. Waiters drifted through with trays of champagne. The music swelled again, elegant and bright, as though nothing cruel had just been said. Marjorie glided past me on her way to the stage, her perfume a cloud of lilies and powder. She paused just long enough to bend down her smile, never faltering for the crowd. Her voice a blade meant only for me. "At least, do not ruin this day for your sister Clara. Keep to yourself." Then she was gone, stepping up beside Victor and Sophia, the picture of the perfect family. I sat frozen, every muscle tight, my eyes burning with tears I refused to shed. Rage and sorrow churned inside me, colliding until I thought I might shatter. I thought of Edward then, of the evenings on his porch, when he told me I was more than their blindness allowed me to believe. His words echoed faintly, a fragile thread against the roar of humiliation. "One day the truth will be in your hands." But tonight, all I felt was the crushing certainty that I had been erased. The applause grew louder as another toast began, glasses clinking, voices rising. Sophia stood on the stage, glowing under the chandeliers, the embodiment of everything they believed mattered. I remained in the shadows, the forgotten daughter, my existence reduced to a footnote in the story of her glory. And yet, as the celebration swelled around me, I felt something stir. A storm, a quiet rebellion, the first spark of a fire long buried. It was faint, barely there, but it pulsed in my chest, reminding me that silence could not last forever. I sat in the back of the ballroom, my body rigid. My hands clamped so tightly together my knuckles ached. The noise around me swelled with each toast for Sophia, each declaration that she was the pride of the Dawson name. I could hardly breathe, the air thick with perfume and champagne, the weight of humiliation pressing me deeper into my chair. Then I noticed him again, the man who had passed by me earlier, moving with purpose through the crowd. His presence was so different from the laughter and cheers surrounding us that he seemed like a shadow cutting across the golden light. He stopped at my table and without hesitation set a thick white envelope before me. His voice was low, deliberate, and his words carved into my mind. Your grandfather wanted you to have this. It is time to tell them who you really are. He straightened, adjusted his jacket, and walked away, disappearing into the sea of polished gowns and tuxedos as though he had never been there at all. My fingers hovered over the envelope, trembling. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it over the applause for Sophia. For a moment, I wondered if this was a cruel trick, another way to humiliate me. But the envelope was real heavy against the polished wood of the table. My breath caught as I slid it into my lap, shielding it from view. I glanced around, but no one noticed me. All eyes were fixed on the stage where Victor was raising his glass to Sophia. My chest tightened. My hands shook as I slid a finger beneath the flap and tore the seal. Inside were several documents bound neatly together along with a folded piece of paper. The first page made my vision blur. It bore the official seal of the Dawson Company signatures at the bottom and one name written clearly across the top, mine. Clara Dawson. My throat closed as I read the words again, unable to believe them. These were transfer agreements, shares of the company, trusts I had never heard of, the Miami Beach house. They were all listed under me, my name, not Sophia's. My eyes darted across the pages, my breath quickening as I flipped through each one. Each document was signed years ago by Edward Dawson, my grandfather. My hands shook harder as I reached the final page. It was a letter handwritten, the ink steady, the penmanship familiar. I unfolded it slowly, tears already burning in my eyes. Clara, if you are reading this, it means the time has come. I chose you because you understand humility, because you know what it is to endure without recognition, and because you see people for who they are rather than what they can give you. Do not doubt yourself any longer. Everything I built belongs to you. My vision blurred as I stared at his words, the paper trembling in my hands. My chest tightened with disbelief and defiance. All these years I had been told I was nothing. I had believed it. And yet here in my lap was proof that the man who started it all had seen me differently. He had chosen me, not Sophia, not Victor, not the perfect image they had tried to uphold. Me. My pulse raced as I clutched the letter to my chest. I wanted to leap up and shout the truth, to throw it in their faces, but fear held me back. Victor's voice carried across the room, commanding, powerful. Sophia's laughter echoed sharp and triumphant. If I stood now, if I dared to challenge them, the backlash could be devastating. My father had spent a lifetime protecting his reputation with intimidation and control. He would not surrender easily. My mind raced with memories, the sting of Victor's slap, the hiss of Marjorie's whispers, Sophia's cruel smirks. For too long I had let them decide who I was. But the envelope in my hands was more than paper. It was freedom. I pressed it against my chest, feeling its weight, the truth vibrating through me like a heartbeat. My grandfather had not abandoned me. He had believed in me all along. That belief surged in me now, clashing with the fear that had defined my life. The applause grew louder as another toast began. Sophia raised her glass, her diamonds catching the light. Guests clinked their glasses together, voices ringing with joy. And I sat there with the truth hidden in my lap, my hands trembling, my body alive with a storm I could no longer contain. For years I had swallowed insults, endured silence, lived as the forgotten daughter. But now, as I stared at Edward's handwriting, I realized the moment he had promised me had finally arrived. The truth was in my hands. The question was whether I had the courage to use it. The letter trembled in my hands long after I had finished reading it, the words seared into me like fire on my skin. Edward's handwriting was unmistakable, steady, strong, carrying a weight of authority that no one in this room could deny. And yet, I could not move. My legs felt anchored to the floor, my body caught between the crushing weight of fear and the sudden surge of possibility. Around me the music swelled. Laughter rose, champagne flowed, and every eye remained fixed on Sophia. No one noticed the storm, raging in the shadows, the storm that lived inside me. I pressed the envelope against my chest, the paper crinkling beneath my grip. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain someone would hear it. For years I had been invisible, and now in one impossible moment I held proof that I had never been what they said I was. My grandfather had seen me. He had chosen me. But fear clawed at me all the same. If I stood up now, if I walked to that stage and revealed what I carried, what would happen? I could picture Victor's face, red with fury, his voice slicing through the room, his hand raised in the way I remembered all too well from childhood. I could hear Marjorie's hiss, sharp and venomous, reminding me that I was an embarrassment, that I should keep quiet for Sophia's sake. And Sophia herself, she would laugh, her voice dripping with scorn, calling me pathetic, jealous, a fool, desperate for attention. I could see it all as though it were already happening, and the thought of enduring that humiliation before hundreds of people made my stomach twist into knots. My palms were slick, my breath shallow. Every instinct told me to run, to hide, to fold the papers back into the envelope and tuck them away until the night ended. Perhaps I could slip out unnoticed, return home, lock the truth in a drawer where no one could touch it. Perhaps safety still meant silence. But then Edward's words rose again in my mind, steady and relentless. Do not mistake their blindness for truth. You have something Sophia does not. You endure. My throat tightened as I clung to those words. Endurance had been my survival, but what if tonight endurance meant something different? Not silence, not shrinking, but standing. My mind whirled with memories, each one cutting deeper than the last. Victor calling me useless at the dinner table while Sophia basked in applause. Marjorie whispering that I should try harder, be better, be more like my sister. Sophia shoving me down the stairs, laughing as I limped away. The sting of every slap, the burn of every insult, the crushing loneliness of being unseen. Each memory rose like a wave crashing over me, threatening to drown me. And yet, beneath the flood, a spark glowed. It was the spark Edward had lit long ago on his porch when he told me that being underestimated was my hidden weapon. I closed my eyes and breathed, clutching the envelope tighter. The music dimmed in my ears. The laughter faded, and all I heard was his voice, quiet but unyielding. One day, when the moment comes, you will know what to do. This was that moment. I opened my eyes and looked toward the stage. Sophia stood beside Victor, her smile dazzling under the chandeliers, the embodiment of everything they celebrated. Victor's voice boomed again, thanking guests, praising Sophia, his pride overflowing like wine from an untended glass. And there was me, seated in the shadows, holding the truth that could shatter their illusion. My chest rose and fell, each breath a battle. Fear screamed at me to stay seated. Courage whispered for me to rise. My body shook as I placed the envelope back on the table, my fingers lingering on its edge. I could walk away. I could keep this secret forever live quietly and avoid the firestorm that would surely follow if I revealed it. But then what? More years of silence, of being mocked, dismissed, erased. More nights spent wondering if I had failed the only man who ever believed in me. The thought pierced me deeper than fear ever could. I imagined Edward's face, his kind eyes, his steady hands, his faith in me. I could not betray that faith, not anymore. I straightened in my chair, my shoulders trembling but firm. My legs felt weak as I pushed myself to my feet, but the decision was made. I would not stay silent. Not this time. I took one step, then another, weaving through the crowd that hardly noticed me, their attention fixed on the glittering stage. Each step was heavy, but with each one my resolve grew stronger. By the time I reached the edge of the stage, my hands no longer trembled. My pulse raced, my throat dry, but inside me the storm had transformed into something else. Power. I had carried their cruelty my entire life, and now I carried the truth. And the truth was heavier, brighter, stronger than all their voices combined. I climbed the first step, my heart pounding, my eyes fixed on the family who had always stood above me. They had no idea what was coming. The clinking of glasses and the hum of celebration filled the ballroom, but as I stepped onto the stage, the sound seemed to falter, replaced by the thunder of my own heartbeat. The lights from the chandeliers blazed down on me, heat prickling against my skin, and for the first time in my life, every eye began to turn toward me. I stood there, the envelope clutched in my hand, my chest rising and falling as I tried to steady my breath. Victor noticed me first. His smile faltered, his eyes narrowing into slits. He leaned toward the microphone, his voice a sharp whisper meant only for me, though the crowd was close enough to hear. "Clara, step down. You are embarrassing yourself." I froze, the command so familiar that my body almost obeyed automatically. Years of conditioning pressed down on me, every moment of silence, every time I had been told to shrink back, every time I had lowered my head because his voice left no room for mine. But not this time. I straightened my shoulders, clutching the envelope tighter, and my voice, though trembling at first, rang clear. "Actually, Father, this moment belongs to me." The ballroom fell into sudden silence. Glasses paused mid-air, conversations cut short. Eyes widened in disbelief. Even Sophia's radiant smile faltered, confusion flickering across her face before it twisted into a smirk. She stepped forward, her gown sweeping the floor as she tilted her head with mock pity. "Are you jealous again, Clara? Trying to steal attention you will never deserve." The words dripped with poison, but they did not pierce me as they once would have. Instead, they fueled me. I lifted the envelope higher, my hand shaking, but steady enough for the crowd to see. "For years you have called me nothing," I said, my voice growing stronger with each syllable. "For years I have been the forgotten daughter, the one mocked, dismissed, erased. But tonight I carry the truth in my hands." Victor lunged forward, his face flushing red, his hand outstretched as if he could tear the papers from my grasp. "Sit down, Clara," he growled. "Do not make a fool of yourself." Before he could reach me, Richard Hale, the lawyer who had given me the envelope, appeared at the edge of the stage. His voice cut through the chaos, calm but firm. "These documents are valid." The crowd gasped, whispers rising like a tide. Sophia's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of disbelief. Victor turned on Richard, his fury barely contained. "You are meddling in matters that do not concern you." Richard's reply was measured, his gaze unflinching. "This concerns everyone in this room, Victor. The truth always does." I pulled the papers from the envelope, the seal of the Dawson Company catching the light. My voice steadied as I held them up. "These are transfer agreements signed by Edward Dawson. He chose me, not Sophia, not Father. He entrusted this company, this legacy, to me." Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Guests leaned forward, craning their necks to see. Some exchanged glances of disbelief, others of intrigue. Sophia laughed suddenly, a sharp, brittle sound. "You expect them to believe this? You, the dumb one! This is pathetic." My hand shook as I held up the letter, Edward's handwriting clear across the page. "He wrote this himself. He said I was chosen because I know what it means to endure, because I see people for who they are, not what they can give me." The murmur of the crowd grew louder, like a storm building. Some nodded, others whispered, the balance of power shifting in subtle waves. Victor tried again, his voice low and dangerous. "Clara, put those down. You do not understand what you are doing." For the first time, I met his gaze without flinching. "No, Father. I understand perfectly. For years you told me I was worthless. Tonight I show you that you were wrong." The silence that followed was heavier than any insult I had ever endured. Hundreds of eyes locked on me, waiting, watching. The chandelier light gleamed against the papers in my hand, a beacon that could not be ignored. Sophia's face twisted with rage, her carefully crafted smile shattered. Marjorie clutched Victor's arm, her knuckles white, her lips pressed into a thin line. I stood at the edge of the stage, my hands steady now, my voice carrying across the room with a strength I had never known I possessed. I am not the dumb one. I am the heir my grandfather chose. And the time for silence is over. The crowd erupted into a mix of gasps and stunned whispers, the ballroom trembling with the weight of a truth no one had expected to hear. The room was still vibrating with the shock of my words when a sound rose above the whispers, faint at first, then steady. The rhythmic tap of a cane against the polished floor. Guests turned their heads toward the front rows, and I followed their gaze. My breath caught in my throat. A figure was rising slowly from his seat, silver hair gleaming under the chandelier lights, shoulders slightly bent, but presence commanding. Edward Dawson, my grandfather. For a moment, I thought I must be dreaming. Everyone in the family had spoken of him as though he were gone too weak, too ill to ever return to the public eye. But there he was, moving with deliberate steps. His cane striking the floor with each stride, his expression unreadable, yet filled with authority no one could deny. The crowd parted instinctively as he approached the stage, silence spreading like fire through the ballroom. Even the music had faded, leaving only the echo of his steps. My chest tightened as I watched him climb the stairs, his hand firm on the rail, his eyes never leaving mine. When he reached me, he placed a steady hand on my shoulder. His touch was warm, grounding, and for the first time that night, my trembling ceased. His voice, though aged, carried clear and strong. I gave these papers to a man I trusted to deliver them when the time was right. That time is now. The whispers erupted into gasps, a wave of disbelief sweeping through the guests. Sophia's face drained of color, her mouth opening as if to protest, but no words came. Victor took a step forward, his fury palpable. "Father!" He barked, his voice cracking with desperation. "You cannot be serious. Giving everything to Clara, the girl who failed at everything." Edward's gaze shifted to him sharp as steel. "Victor, I watched you build wealth, but in building it you lost compassion. You measure worth by arrogance and intimidation. That is not leadership, it is tyranny." Victor's face reddened, his jaw clenched, but Edward did not stop. "Sophia," he said, turning to her with a sadness that cut deeper than anger. "You have brilliance, yes, but brilliance without humility is only vanity. You seek applause, not purpose. You chase adoration, not responsibility." Sophia's lips trembled, her diamonds glittering as if mocking her sudden fragility. She stammered, "Grandfather, I have worked my whole life to make you proud. Everything I have achieved, every success, it was all for this family." Edward shook his head slowly. "You achieved for yourself, Sophia, not for others. That is the difference. I chose Clara because she has endured neglect and cruelty, yet she has not hardened her heart. She will lead not with arrogance, but with strength born of humility." Murmurs swept through the crowd again, this time tinged with approval. Some nodded, some whispered to their neighbors, the tide shifting before my very eyes. I felt tears sting at the corners of my eyes, my throat tight as Edward's words sank into me. All my life I had been told I was less, that I was nothing, yet here stood the man whose opinion mattered most, declaring me worthy before the world. Victor's voice rose again, desperate, almost pleading. "You would destroy everything for her father. She is weak. She does not have the strength to carry the Dawson name." Edward's reply was swift, his tone final. "Strength is not measured by cruelty, Victor. It is measured by resilience, by the ability to rise when the world pushes you down. Clara has that strength. She has endured what no one else in this family has, and still she stands with compassion in her heart. That is why I chose her." The ballroom erupted in gasps, some clapping hesitantly, others exchanging astonished glances. Victor's fists clenched at his sides, his fury barely contained. Marjorie tugged at his arm, her face pale, her smile gone. Sophia shook her head violently, her voice breaking. "No, this cannot be happening. This is supposed to be mine. Everything was promised to me." Edward's cane struck the floor, sharply silencing her. "Promises built on arrogance are empty," he said. "Promises built on truth endure. The truth is that Clara will lead this family forward." He turned back to me, then his eyes softening, his voice lowering so only I could hear. "Now, Clara, show them why I was right to believe in you." My throat tightened, my chest swelling with a mix of fear and determination. I looked out at the crowd, at the faces staring at me, some skeptical, others curious, a few beginning to nod. For the first time, I did not see strangers staring at the forgotten daughter. I saw witnesses to a transformation. I drew a deep breath, my voice steady as I spoke into the microphone. All my life I was told I was nothing. Tonight you have heard it again. But the truth is here in my hands and in the voice of the man who built this family's legacy. I will not waste what he entrusted me with. I will honor it in a way that builds people, not just prophets. The room rippled with applause, hesitant at first, then stronger. It rose like a tide, washing over the silence that had suffocated me for years. I glanced at Sophia, her eyes wide with disbelief, her smirk shattered. Victor's jaw tightened, his pride collapsing under the weight of truth. And Edward, standing tall, despite the tremor in his body, gave a single nod of approval. In that moment, I realized that the story they had written for me, the dumb one, the failure, the shadow, was ending. A new story had begun, and it was mine to tell. For a heartbeat, the ballroom seemed to hold its breath, the applause fading into a silence so heavy it felt like the chandeliers themselves bowed under its weight. I stood with the documents in my hand, my grandfather's steady presence beside me, the truth laid bare for all to see. Then the storm broke. Sophia lunged forward, her eyes wild, her carefully constructed composure collapsing in an instant. She reached for the papers, her diamond bracelet flashing under the light as she screamed, "Those belong to me. You cannot take them." Her voice, shrill and raw, cracked through the room. I held the papers tighter, stepping back, my heart racing. The crowd gasped as Sophia shoved me hard across the stage. My heel slipped against the polished wood, and I staggered, catching myself before I fell. For a split second, memories of childhood assaults flooded back her laughter when she pulled my hair, the sting of her hand pushing me down the stairs. It was the same cruelty, only now it was being revealed for the world to see. Guests erupted in shocked whispers. Phones lifted, cameras flashing. And then I noticed him, a well-known journalist seated near the front, his phone already raised, live streaming the chaos. His face was a mixture of astonishment and grim satisfaction as he captured every second. This was no longer a family squabble hidden behind marble walls. This was public. Victor stormed forward, his face red with fury. "Enough of this spectacle. Clara, hand those over now. You are making a fool of yourself." His booming voice rattled the room, but no one moved to support him. The weight of Edward's words still hung in the air, undeniable. The journalist's live stream light blinked, capturing Victor's anger, Sophia's breakdown, and my trembling but unyielding stance. Sophia tried again, her hands clawing at the papers. "Give them to me. They were promised to me." She shoved me once more, and this time I fell to my knees, the papers nearly slipping from my grasp. Gasps rippled through the crowd, some women covering their mouths, others shaking their heads in disbelief. A murmur rose. She attacked her sister. "Did you see that? This is disgraceful!" Edward slammed his cane against the floor, the sound reverberating like a gavel. "Enough," he thundered. The authority in his voice silenced even Victor. The old man's frame trembled, but his eyes blazed with fire. "This family will not be led by violence and vanity. What you see tonight is the truth of what has been hidden for years." Sophia froze her chest, heaving, her eyes darting toward the guests who were no longer clapping for her, but staring with judgment, pity, even disgust. She looked smaller suddenly, the gleam of her jewels no longer dazzling her beauty, drowned beneath the ugliness of her rage. Victor's voice broke through, desperate. "Father, you are ruining everything!" These people came to celebrate Sophia, not to watch Clara embarrass herself. Edward's reply was sharp as steel. "No, Victor. They came to see the truth, and now they have. Your arrogance has blinded you for too long. You cannot silence Clara anymore." The murmurs grew louder, some guests even clapping softly, emboldened by Edward's words. The journalist's stream buzzed with comments, screens lighting up across the room as people shared the broadcast. Within minutes, the scandal was no longer contained within the ballroom walls. It was spilling out into the city, into the world. Sophia's face crumpled. "This is not fair," she wailed, her voice breaking. "I deserve this. I earned this." Edward's gaze softened, but his words were firm. You were given every advantage, Sophia, but entitlement is not the same as worth. You have brilliance, but brilliance without humility destroys. The crowd watched in silence, the weight of his judgment crushing her. Victor grabbed Marjorie's arm, his face twisted with fury. Let us leave! We owe them nothing! But as he tried to pull her away, Marjorie hesitated. For the first time in my life, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. She looked between Sophia's rage, Victor's fury, and Edward's steady defiance. Her lips parted as if to speak, but then she lowered her head and allowed herself to be led toward the exit, her silence saying more than words ever could. Sophia remained rooted, trembling. Her fists clenched, her eyes burning with hatred as she glared at me. You will regret this, Clara, she hissed. But her threat fell flat, drowned beneath the reality that the entire room, the entire world had seen her true face. The journalist ended his live stream only after capturing Sophia's collapse, Victor's retreat, and Edward's final words. Tonight marks the beginning of change. No longer will cruelty define this family. The room erupted into applause, not the hollow applause that once celebrated Sophia's every move, but genuine applause that rang with approval, with recognition, with a shifting tide. I rose slowly from the floor, clutching the papers, my legs unsteady, but my resolve stronger than ever. For years I had endured Sophia's cruelty in silence. Tonight, the silence shattered, and she was the one exposed. She had struck me in front of hundreds, and now the world would know her not as the golden daughter, but as the sister who crumbled under the truth. Victor and Sophia left the ballroom in disgrace, their reputations unraveling before my eyes. Guests whispered, journalists scribbled notes, cameras flashed. But through the chaos, one truth remained clear. For the first time, I was not invisible. I was not the dumb one. I was Clara Dawson, and the world had finally seen me. The ballroom was quieter now, the echoes of chaos still lingering in the corners, but the storm had passed. Victor and Sophia were gone. Their retreat abrupt and humiliating. Marjorie had followed them silently, her face pale, her perfect smile cracked beyond repair. What remained was a room full of witnesses, eyes fixed on me, waiting to see what I would do next. For a moment I stood there, the documents pressed to my chest, my breath uneven. My grandfather's hand rested lightly on my shoulder, his presence steady, his strength a reminder that I was no longer alone. Edward cleared his throat, his voice carrying across the hall with authority sharpened by years of leadership. Tonight marks the end of arrogance ruling this family, he said. From this day forward, Clara will lead. She will hold what I have built, not because of birth order or empty promises, but because she has proven herself in ways none of you can deny. Murmurs swept through the guests, but this time they were not whispers of scandal. They were words of agreement, of support. Applause broke out slow at first, then stronger, swelling into a wave that filled the room. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I did not let them fall. Not yet. I needed to stand tall to show them all that I was ready. I stepped forward, my hands still trembling, but my voice steady as I spoke into the microphone. For years I was told I was nothing. For years I was mocked, dismissed, forgotten. But tonight you have seen the truth. My grandfather believed in me when no one else did, and I will not waste what he entrusted to me. The applause grew louder, guests rising to their feet. Some clapped politely, others with genuine conviction. Faces that had once glanced past me now watched with respect. I drew a deep breath and continued. Leadership is not about wealth or titles. It is about endurance, compassion, and the courage to rise when the world tells you to stay silent. That is what I bring to this family, to this company, to this legacy. I will not lead with arrogance. I will lead with strength forged from years of being overlooked. My voice did not shake. The words poured out, fueled by every insult I had swallowed, every scar I had carried, every tear I had shed. They were no longer wounds. They were my power. I looked at Edward, then his eyes glistening with pride, and felt the last of my fear slip away. The applause thundered, drowning out the silence that had once suffocated me. Cameras flashed, journalists scribbled, and for the first time it was my name they were writing. Later, when the ballroom had emptied, I stepped outside onto the balcony. The night air was cool against my skin, the city lights stretching endlessly before me, glittering against the dark. For years, I had looked at those lights as though they belonged to someone else, symbols of a world closed to me. But tonight, they felt different. They felt like a promise. Edward joined me, leaning on his cane, his breath steady. "You see now, don't you, Clara?" His voice was soft, almost tender. "Yes," I whispered. "I see it clearly." He smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting the city lights. "Then, carry it well. The future is yours." I stood there beside him, my heart swelling with gratitude and determination. I thought of the girl I had been sitting at the end of the table, shrinking under Victor's glare, silenced by Marjorie's whispers, mocked by Sophia's smirks. That girl had been erased in their eyes, but she had endured, and endurance had become strength. I closed my eyes, letting the night air fill my lungs. The fear that had once gripped me was gone. In its place was resolve. I was not the dumb one. I was not invisible. I was Clara Dawson, and I had been chosen not for perfection, but for resilience, for heart, for the strength forged in silence. When I opened my eyes, I turned toward the city, toward the future waiting for me. And to those who would one day hear my story, I had something to say. If you have ever been mocked, dismissed, or told you were less, remember this moment. Your worth is not defined by the voices that try to bury you. Your time will come, and when it does, the truth will speak louder than any insult ever could. I stepped back inside the applause, still echoing faintly in the air, the weight of my grandfather's hand on my shoulder, the light of the city still burning in my eyes. The night had begun as Sophia's coronation, but it ended as my rebirth. The shadows that had caged me for so long had shattered. The legacy was mine to carry, and I would carry it with dignity. I walked forward not as the forgotten daughter, but as the heir chosen by truth. I know by now your heart is racing as mine was that night. You heard every word you felt, every shift in the room, and maybe, just maybe, you remembered moments in your own life when you were the one who was overlooked, dismissed, told you were less. That is why I share my story, not because it is only mine, but because it belongs to everyone who has ever carried the weight of being invisible. And now, I want to talk directly to you, the person listening, the person watching, the person who stayed with me all the way through. If you have ever been labeled the dumb one, the weak one, the one who would never succeed, I want you to pause for a moment and let my story sink in. For years, I believed those voices. I let them carve their judgments into me like stone. But here is the truth. I discovered no label, no insult, no dismissal has the power to define you unless you let it. That is what I want you to take away tonight. When the people closest to you fail to see your worth, it does not mean you are worthless. It means their vision is broken. I know many of you have lived long enough to carry scars of your own. Some of you are parents, grandparents, workers who gave everything and were never thanked. Some of you were told you were not enough by your own families. Some of you worked in jobs where your effort was overlooked while others were celebrated. Maybe some of you sacrificed your dreams so others could shine only to be forgotten when the spotlight dimmed. I want you to know I see you. Just as my grandfather saw me, I see you. If this story moved you, I ask you to do something simple but powerful. Leave a comment below. Tell me what part resonated with you most. Was it the moment I was called the dumb one in front of a ballroom full of strangers? Was it the years of silence where I held my pain inside? Was it the appearance of my grandfather stepping out of the shadows to say, "Enough"? Or was it the moment when the truth was finally spoken and the lies could no longer survive? Your words matter here because your story matters too. Sharing what touched you is not just about engagement, it is about connection. When you comment, you remind others in this community that they are not alone. And you remind yourself that your voice deserves to be heard. So please, write a few words. Share your moment. I promise you someone else reading will nod with tears in their eyes, recognizing themselves in your truth. And if you have ever carried a story of your own, a moment when you were humiliated, overlooked, or dismissed, consider sharing that too. Stories have power. They break silence. They turn wounds into wisdom. Just as my grandfather told me words can build empires or tear them down, your words in the comments can build someone's courage. You may never know who needed to hear your story until you share it. Now, if this story gave you even one moment of strength, I ask you for something else. Subscribe to this channel. It may seem like a small act, just a click, but it means the world to creators who put their hearts into telling stories that matter. Subscribing is how you make sure you never miss another story like this one. It is also how you help this channel grow so more people, especially those who need hope, can find it. When you subscribe, you are not just following a channel, you are joining a family of listeners who believe in truth, justice, resilience, and healing. And I will go one step further. If you know someone in your life who has been dismissed, overlooked, or told they would never amount to anything, share this video with them. Send it to your daughter, your friend, your coworker, your neighbor, because sometimes all it takes is one story to remind someone that their life is not defined by cruelty. Imagine what could change if even one person you know heard these words and found the courage to stand up for themselves. I also want to ask you something very personal. Where are you listening from tonight? Drop it in the comments. It always amazes me when I see this community stretch across cities, states, and even countries. Every comment that says, "I am watching from New York," or "I am here in Texas," or "Greetings from Florida," creates a map of connection. It shows us we are not isolated in our struggles, but part of a larger family bound by resilience. So take a moment. Tell us where you are. Let us see the light of your presence. Now, let us talk about something deeper. Many of you may wonder why I kept silent for so long, why I allowed the insults, the humiliation, the cruelty to continue. The answer is simple: fear. Fear is powerful. Fear tells us we are safer in silence. Fear convinces us that speaking out will destroy us. But fear is also a liar. The truth is that silence destroys us far more than speaking ever could. That is why I stood up on that stage. That is why I speak now. And that is why I want you to take this story as an invitation to examine your own silence. Ask yourself, what truths have I buried? What moments should I have spoken up? And what would happen if I found the courage to stand now? I do not ask these questions to burden you. I ask them because I believe with all my heart that it is never too late to rise. Whether you are 22 like I was that night, or 50 or 70 or older, your voice still matters. Your truth still has power. Your silence can still be broken. So here is my challenge to you. Do not let this video end without taking an action. Comment, share, subscribe, but also reflect. Tell someone in your life the truth you have carried quietly. Write it in a journal. Speak it aloud. Or even start small by acknowledging to yourself that you deserve to be seen. If you are still with me now, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Stories like this take courage to tell, and they take courage to hear. If you felt the weight of it, if you cried, if you clenched your fists in anger, then you understand why it matters. And if you felt even one flicker of hope, then you understand why I will keep telling these stories. You are not alone. You are not worthless. You are not defined by those who failed to see you. You are strong, you are resilient, and your truth when spoken can set you free. Before I leave you, I will say this: hit that like button if this story stirred something in you. It is not just about numbers, it is about letting others know this message matters. The more likes, the more the platform shares it, the more people will find it. And who knows, maybe the very person who needs it most will stumble upon it because you took that one small step. So here we are at the end of my story, but not the end of yours. The question is, what will you do next? Will you stay silent, or will you stand? Will you keep your story hidden, or will you share it? The choice is yours, and I hope tonight you choose courage. I will be here waiting for your comments, reading every word, hearing every truth you share. Because together, we are not invisible. Together, we are powerful. Thank you for being part of this moment. Thank you for listening. Thank you for carrying this story with me. And do not forget, your time will come, and when it does, the truth will speak louder than any insult ever could.